famine was over by then, and there was no longer anything to hold her where she was, her own husband having died about the same time that Ruth had. She advised Ruth to stay put right there in Moab and to try to snag herself another man from among her own people. She was a strong-willed old party, and when Ruth said she wanted to go to Israel with her, Naomi tried to talk her out of it. Even if by some gynecological fluke she managed to produce another son for Ruth, she said by the time he was old enough, Ruth would be ready for the geriatric ward. But Ruth had a mind of her own, too. Besides which, they'd been together a lot. And home to her was wherever Naomi was. Where you go, I will go. And home where you live, I will live. And if your God is Yahweh, then my God is Yahweh too. So Naomi gave in, and when the two of them pulled into Bethlehem, Naomi's hometown, there was a brass band waiting for them at the station. Ruth had a spring in her step and a fascinating Moabite accent, and it wasn't long before she caught the eye of a well-heeled farmer named Boaz. He was a little long in the tooth, but he still knew a pretty girl when he saw one. And before long, in a fatherly kind of way, he took her under his wing. He told the hired hands not to give her any trouble. He helped her in the fields. He had her over for a meal, and when she asked him one day in her disarming Moabite way why he was being so nice to her, he said he heard how good she'd been to Naomi, who happened to be a distant cousin of his. And as far as he was concerned, she deserved nothing but the best. Now Naomi was nobody's fool and saw which way the wind was blowing long before Ruth did. As soon as Boaz had a good supper under his belt and had polished off a couple of nightcaps, he'd go to the barn and hit the sack. Around midnight, she said, Ruth should slip out into the barn and get the sack too. If Boaz's feet just happened to be uncovered somehow, and if she just happened to be close enough to keep them warm, well, that probably wouldn't be the worst thing to happen either. But she wasn't to go too far, because back in Jericho, Boaz's mother, Rahab, had had a rather seamy reputation for going too far professionally, and anything that reminded him of that might scare him off permanently. Ruth followed her mother-in-law's advice to the letter, and it worked like a charm. And after a few legal matters were taken care of, Boaz made her his lawfully wedded wife. They had a son named Obed. After a while, and Naomi came to take care of him and stayed on for the rest of her life. Then in time, Obed had a son of his own named Jesse. And Jesse in turn had 7 sons, the 7th of whom was named David, and ended up as the greatest king Israel ever had. With Ruth for his great-grandmother and Naomi for his grandfather's nurse, it was hardly any wonder. It's a wonderful story. And within the story are some hidden lessons about faith and courage that we can discover and embrace. For example, what sets the stage of the entire story is something tragic, a famine. Ruth 1:1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. It was true hunger that drove the family to a foreign land. Sometimes we think of hunger as only a lack of food, but we can hunger or even starve for other things as well. And so we might think about the question, for what do I hunger? For what do I hunger? Has there ever been, or is there now, a hunger in me? What is the gnawing pain deep inside me asking for? What can we do about the hunger in us? Of course, there's the physical hunger we know how to handle. If it is something else, though, like Ruth, we turn to God. As it is written, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Also, early in the story, tragedy hits again. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. But Elimelech, the husband, died. Then after 10 years, the sons died, and their wives, Orpah and Ruth, were alone with Naomi. So much loss and so much sadness. But it was that loss that moved Naomi then to return to Bethlehem. And Ruth decided to be beside her when she did. So we might ponder the question, what losses have shaped my life? Death and loss are often, but not always, related to a person in our lives. We may have other significant losses, like our health, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a sense of safety. Losses create a big impact on who we are and how we view ourselves and our world. Sometimes we even lose ourselves in this life, and we wonder what to do about that loss. When we turn to God, we find that God is with us in some very extraordinary ways. As it is written, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that is lost? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it. God understands all kinds of losses. God has experienced all kinds of losses and is willing and able to help us find something important in the midst of loss. In this great drama, we see Ruth standing by Naomi in such a fierce way. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. Naomi must have been beside herself with pain, but Ruth remained unflinchingly by her side. Sometimes when we are struggling, people do fly-by caring that is common in our culture. They care for a moment because of their own discomfort or inability or lack of awareness. They return to their life quickly. But sometimes we have someone in our life that is there for the long haul of our pain, who is literally there beside us or who is praying for us constantly. Someone like Ruth who sticks to us like glue for just as long as it takes. So who is someone who has stood by you through thick and thin, through joy and suffering. How did that constant presence affect you? And whether or not you've had that kind of person in your life, have you been able to identify another unfailing presence that neither slumbers nor sleeps, that is there no matter what? God does not leave us orphaned. We have an advocate, a comforter, the Holy Spirit that surrounds us always. As the one who has stood with you, giving you the strength to stand by someone else. Of course, one of the most beautiful parts of Ruth's story is the way in which she showed unbelievable kindness to Naomi. Where you go, I will go. And when Ruth married Boaz, Naomi was still with her, caring for the child of their union. Ruth's kindness also returned to her through Boaz, who was equally kind and generous to Ruth. Ruth and Naomi weren't doing very well in Bethlehem financially, and Ruth was doing a lot of physical labor, the hot physical labor of the fields, gleaning grain. And she worked from dawn to dusk. She never took a break, it said. She was doing this to survive. She was doing this for herself, but also for Naomi. And Boaz not only gave her protection, but a better place to gather grain. And when she became thirsty, he gave her refreshment. And later, he married her. And so we might ask the question of ourselves, when have I ever been shown kindness in an unexpected way? When have I been shown kindness? And has the kindness of another motivated me to show kindness to someone in an unexpected way? Kindness is so important in our Christian faith that it is one of the fruits of the Spirit. When the Holy Spirit dwells in a person, that person is kind. The kindness of another can move us to tears, and it can move us to action toward others. Is there someone right now in your life who desperately needs your kindness? Finally, the story of Ruth is an incredible example of someone moving from hopelessness to hopefulness. When we're feeling beaten down and when tragedy hits us hard and when we don't know how we will ever survive, we have an incredibly hard choice to make. We can remain hopeless and live in that space permanently. Or we can do the hardest work of our lives and we, with faith, move beyond the less of hopelessness to the fullness of hope. It often isn't easy, and it is truly, truly work. We may forget how hard Ruth worked in the field of despair, and we may forget the courage it took her to move one foot in front of the other. But that's what she did. It is the written story. In the written story, we're not told how long this took. And it may appear that it just happened instantly, but I'm sure it did not. Ruth teaches us that the reality, as well as the feelings of hunger, loss, grief, and lack of surety do not need to be perpetually our reality. There is more beyond all that. And it is God who has promised us more. Those who believe will not perish, but will have everlasting life. And that's what happened to Ruth. Her faithful courage lived on, even if it skipped a generation or two. And it became part of the heritage that Jesus received. In the end, her story teaches all of us that we can move on and live in complete hopefulness because of God and what God has given to us. Praise God. That is